You just boarded your flight. And as you're walking through the aisle, you see that there are certain people sitting in the front of the flight, sipping that champagne and relaxing nicely as you're about to board. And you all think, how is it that these guys and gals are sitting in front? Now you may say, Ashish, these tickets are really expensive. They cost $10 to $12,000 per ticket. What if I were to tell you that that is still attainable by simply maximizing your miles, points, and credit card rewards? And today's guest has done exactly that over the years. Today, we're going to talk to Anshul Singh, who runs the popular blog called Points, Miles, and Bling. And he is going to share with us five of his favorite miles and points redemptions to fly in first class. Not in business class, but first class. So let's get started. And hello, and welcome to yet another episode of the Travel Dialogue podcast. As we promised you before, our goal is to bring some of the foremost experts in the world of travel, miles, and points. And I'm excited to introduce to you my friend Anshul. Anshul, how are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure being here. I'm doing well. And that's a lot of pressure calling me an expert, but I do what I can do, but definitely not an expert by any means. Happy to chat with you about points, miles, and everything that comes with.
So, Anshul, I obviously know you for a while now, and I know about points, miles, and bling. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So, like she said, Points, Miles, and Bling is my website, is my blog. That's how I started off writing about travel hacking, and I'm doing the air quotes for those that may not be watching this, simply because travel hacking is such an overused word these days. But yeah, definitely started writing about my experiences and sharing things beyond just talking with friends, and that's how the website truly started off, or that's how the brand Points, Miles, and Bling truly started off. And yeah, I've been in the space for aging myself, but since 2014 for sure in a very formal way. But before that, informally, as I was still traveling around the world for my 9 to 5 job, which afforded me the luxuries of travel to go around the world for student recruitment because I was working with a university. And that's what really kicked it off. And here we are about 15 years later.
It's interesting how we kind of have the same story. You know, we grew up in the same city, moved to North America, and our work made sure that we got into the miles and points space. So anyway, the website's name is a clear giveaway. You know, when you hear the word bling, when you started off, was the focus always more on like the luxury side of travel, or were you just focused on trying to find that niche deal, and then you slowly started ramping up towards like the more appealing part of it?
I mean, story time, if you can afford me a minute or so. Uh, to be very honest, that bling really never was supposed to mean bling in the travel sphere as much. So here's the story. So I grew up, like you said, in Mumbai, and in India, you would know this growing up, it was very normal even for guys to wear a couple of gold chains and things like that. So I definitely wore that. So when I moved here as a student back in like 2002, 2003, I still was wearing my couple of gold chains, a couple of rings and things like that. Friends that I made at university started teasing me with, "Oh, here comes Bling with all his gold on him." It wasn't overly gold laden, to be very honest, but it was. Now, when I look back at some of the old pictures, I'm like, "Wow, who was that guy?" So yeah, that bling stuck with me just because I used to wear a little bit of gold on me at the time. So when I was thinking about names and such, I thought, what is my informal name if I had to put one? And that's where the bling came from. So it was never meant to be points, miles, and bling like first class bling like money or anything like that. It was about sort of very, as most blogs tend to be, it's very insular. It's all about me. So it really came from there. But I was obviously cognizant of the fact that it sort of blended well with what I was trying to write about, which was more about business class, first class, and all the opulence that travel can bring through points and miles. So yeah, it came through that points, miles, and bling. But just yeah, a little tidbit that bling was supposed to be me as opposed to the actual bling from travel.
So that is actually a very perfect segue into what we will be discussing today. And as you correctly mentioned, that a lot of attention in the miles and points sphere is often grabbed by the most opulent stays. You know, you have all these first class deals and business class, and everyone having their own bragging rights about how I booked this really nice deal. I bought points at a discount. I transferred this during this transfer bonus and, blah, blah, blah. In this episode today, we are going to go over five of your favorite miles and points redemptions. And it will be really interesting to see. And the reason why I'm doing this is that the great thing about what we do in miles and points is every new person that we talk to has his or her own story and has his or her own favorite redemption. Each person thinks it in a very different way. And it's just fascinating to see that. It's the same miles and points currency, but it's like you have the same ingredients and each person makes an amazing dish. And each dish is different, almost like a different cuisine sometimes, but it's really tasty. So speaking of that, and since I know that you also love food like I do, let's start. I can kind of give you the stage and then you can begin with some of your favorite miles and points redemptions.
We'll talk about a few, and very aptly put that it's almost like being your own chef, right? You have all the ingredients and you make whatever is the best version for you. It's very easy to simply talk about the most opulent things. And oftentimes, if you've been in the space for a little while, the most opulent things tend to be the same usual two or three airlines that everybody wants to talk about, that everybody says is a great redemption and whatnot. So instead, I brought a filter. Hopefully, it's slightly different and folks listening in can appreciate that. I thought, oh, what were some of my sort of experiences that truly surprised me as well? I didn't go in thinking that I would enjoy them as much, be it first class or business. And I was able to pull enough first class flights that I've done that actually just surprised me with different elements that they had. So I figured let's go through that rather than the quintessential, oh yeah, Emirates first class or Qatar first class or the usual stuff that, or Singapore's, so let's go through some of the ones that I think I found more interesting. So the first one that comes to mind more recently that I did, maybe 2022, 2023, was Oman Air. I didn't have much expectation with Oman Air going in. I looked at a couple of reviews and such, and it looked pretty decent going in. But I flew Oman Air. It was first class on their 787 from London to Oman. Actually, I did the reverse because I wanted to try out their first class lounge as well in Muscat. So I flew business class there, and on my way back, I flew first class, which was Muscat to London, and then I was connecting to Toronto and onwards to Ottawa, which is where I'm based out of Ottawa, Canada. And that entire one-way route from Muscat to London to Toronto to Ottawa cost me 109,000 aeroplan points, which is fantastic value for those that may not know. And was less than, I guess, less than $150 in Canadian. So $100 for those of you, or $110 USD for those of you that are used to the US denomination. But just the first class lounge experience in Muscat was just truly mind blowing. I'm not a big fan of in your face opulence. I like the understated elegance of things. And I thought Oman Air really hit the mark, both in their lounge as well as their first class cabin, because the suites were brand new on their 787-9s, the first class suites, that is. And the first class lounge was super nice, like opulent without being in your face, formal without being overly formal. And the service was really, really nice, both places. A few things obviously have changed since I did that redemption with Aeroplan. One is Oman Air is now fully part of One World and is not as readily available on Aeroplan as it used to be, despite the fact that they continue to be partners for now. And obviously Oman Air phased out their first class cabin to what they now call business studio. So it's the exact same cabin, exactly the same kind of treatment that you get, but they're now using these business class studio as a sort of an upsell. So the only way you can get in there is you redeem or you buy or you purchase for business class, and then you get to pay a little bit of an overage to get yourself into that first class. And let me tell you, they have changed nothing from the first class to business studio. The same kind of service, the same kind of cabin, nothing has changed. And it's perhaps one of the most beautiful first class cabins I've seen. It comes at a cost because they do two things slightly differently. They don't have any overhead luggage space. So when you walk into that first class cabin, it's so high and it's so open. It sort of really gets you that. It's that typical thing, right? When you are looking for a nice house, you look for nice tall ceilings and such. So you get that overhead space and you suddenly realize, oh, this cabin is super spacious. The cabin doors are beautiful, beautifully ornate and gives you all the privacy. Food options are great. Ashish, I hope you can back me on this. It really suits my picks of the ones that I enjoy the most. Comes with food. You said you were a foodie as well, just like I am. And a lot of the Middle Eastern carriers lean towards that spiced food, which I have a palate for growing up in India. And I really enjoy that palate. So again, Oman, just as a country, or Oman Air, their food service is just spot on with their serving that they give. So Oman Air really up there for me in terms of how it surprised me, because I didn't think much of it. I thought, hey, first class, it's a smaller airline. It's not going to be like super amazing over the top. But let me tell you, like the service was clearly like at par with their neighbors that we have just named, the other neighboring airlines that are priced much higher, don't get spoken about as much. So very understated products. If you get a chance to go, the listeners, definitely give them a try. Even with what they now call a business studio, nothing has changed in terms of service, the hard product, the soft product, everything remains the same. You're pretty much going into first class experience without calling it first class.
I was just about to ask you that question, and you almost partially answered it. When you're flying these premium cabins, do you have a preference in terms of assigning weightage to the hard product versus the soft product? Because I mean, I'll give you my example. Sometimes what happens is the hard product may not be as per my expectations. I'm a really tall guy, so I sometimes don't find the beds very comfortable and things like that. But very often, if the soft product makes for it, if the service is good, if the food is good, I'm okay, and I don't crib too much on it. So, where do you stand with respect to that?
Exactly the same. Where do I lie would be more the thing, because when you're fully flat laid out, I'm a big guy, like I have broad shoulders. I'm just generally a heavy big guy, and I sleep on my side. And I like to sleep. I like to relax when I'm in business class or first class or whatever. I'm not the guy that's trying to pound away all the drinks on the menu and all the food on the menu just because I'm there. I'm happy to sort of eat my fill and then just sleep. And if but there is a cabin and a seat that allows me to truly rest and enjoy the cabin. No, even if I'm not sleeping, I like to just lay down, watch TV, or do a bit of work, or whatever the case might be. Those are the things I value the most. And one of the things I've noticed as a trend is this entire, especially in the new business class cabins, is especially this thing about half your seat is under the seat in front of you when you're laid out. So half your bodies are under the seat in front of you. That's not really the best, especially for me. Like I said, I'm a bigger guy with broad shoulders. And if I sleep on the side, there's just not enough footwell space. And that's, to me, that's the worst product out there. So I really enjoy, well, first class, because there's no going under the seat in front of you kind of deal there when you're laying down. But even business class seats and such, Oman Air is actually a great example. Their business class seat, I don't know what they're called. Perhaps they're basically like rectangular shaped seats, and no part of your seat is going under the seat in front of you. You have each person has their own little cubby or studio, even in business class, and really, really good seats because it allows you that space and allows you that movement within the space that you've been assigned in business class, let alone first class, which is exceptional. So yeah, to your point, I value my sleep, I value my space, and I definitely look for seats and configurations where half my body doesn't have to be under a seat in front of me, because those are just the worst setup or configurations for me personally.
I think the comparison about Oman Air being really good and not getting the same kind of limelight as opposed to their other Middle Eastern peers. If you fly Thai Airways, for example, Thai Airways business class is also a very good product. And somehow all the buzz is captured by Singapore Airlines, and people don't talk enough about Thai Airways when United Miles was still pretty useful. You could book Mumbai, Bangkok, or even I once did Bangkok, Shanghai on Thai Airways business class. It was fantastic. It's just that
Mhm.
people don't speak about it enough, and not enough people know about it.
I think it also comes with the immediate look and feel of a cabin, to be honest. And this entire Airways, much like many others that I'll speak about, is one of those where when you walk in, it doesn't scream opulence at you, even if it's in first class on their 380, or the business class product doesn't scream sort of that elegant and opulent, but they're super comfy. The seats are really nice. super spacious. The service levels are pretty good, even for Asian standards. Really, really good. They may again not be Singapore level or Cathay level, but they are very, very strong. The food palette again suits my palate, so I enjoy them. And more importantly, on the ground, I really enjoyed Thai Airways lounges, because if you're in first, you get a free spa treatment, which by the way is the same as Oman Air. That you get your 30-minute free spa treatment or a massage, very similar to what Thai does. I think Thai does a full hour if you're in first class, and about 30 minutes if you're in business class in Bangkok, which is amazing. So yeah, when you look at the overall package, it's amazing. But as most things go with media, social media particularly, it's whatever stands out aesthetically is what gets the most sort of news, as opposed to whatever stands out, say, for a family. And that's a very different component that doesn't get spoken about as much in the points and miles world. It is very easy for me when I'm traveling by myself, just as a single person, doesn't have to worry about kids or other family members as expectations and such. And very different for, hey, you're a young father yourself, so you know this. When you have a kid in tow, it's very different, and the kind of experience that you get is very different. The kind of experience you expect is very different. So all of that gets put in, right? So if you ask a family what their favorite business class is, theirs could be very different to somebody that only travels by themselves for work or whatever the case might be.
I mean, in my experience, I've seen with all the different areas. I've done a ton of travel in the last couple of years. We've also went to the US once, but we did Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, pretty much most of the Southeast Asian continent. And I would see across the board, whether you're flying coach or premium cabins, the service levels are excellent. And you don't really see much of a difference. The moment they see you with a kid, they immediately treat you in a very different way. I remember when we were flying on the A380 Mumbai to Singapore, it's the flight that leaves at night and reaches early in the morning. Immediately had the captain come over, say hi, asking if they want to, whether my daughter wants a glass of milk, and giving her a little teddy bear. These little things, that we usually never thought about before, but it makes your trip very comfortable. They got an extra blanket. They have these little touches, which make it a very, very nice experience for you.
100%. And I don't think anybody comes, this is an honest opinion, anybody comes even close to what Singapore does with when kids are in cabin. And I've seen that, not that I've traveled with kids, but I've seen that when I've been traveling. When was it? Actually, you would like this. Here's a cricket connection. One of my favorite flights, for all the wrong reasons, I suppose, was my long haul from Singapore to San Francisco in Singapore business class. And there were a couple of kids in there, and the way they were being treated, pampered, spoiled in the best ways possible. The little teddy that came out, or the coloring book that came out, or little snack packets that went out for them. At least let the parents know that they are seen. And if the kid is crying, that's okay. That's normal. That's expected. The crew, the staff, everybody was just so good with that. And a very stark difference from what you see here in North America or Western Europe, European airlines, to be very honest. And the reason I said it, the cricket connection, is because that's the first ever flight that I saw a full cricket game. It was November 20th. You know where this is going. World Cup final. November 19th. Uh, yeah, World Cup finals. I watched India lose to Australia in a heartbreaking World Cup final, but that was on the Singapore flight. I was watching the game entirely in the lounge, and I was worried that I'd miss out. I think one of their staff members saw me watching cricket and said, "Hey, what flight are you on?" And I mentioned, and he said, "What's the score?" So he was an Indian guy out of Singapore, and he said, "Oh, good for you. You're flying them because they have live TV." And my eyes immediately lit up, and I was like, "Are you serious?" So yeah, got to experience the entire live sport, and not just for an hour or so, right? Because I watched the entire second innings, the heartbreaking second innings on the flight. But again, one of those very memorable, because I was able to experience something like that while in business class. And the only other piece I remembered from that is how the kids, who were adjacent to me, were being sort of spoiled with the little trinkets that they were getting throughout the flight, not just when they came in. So yeah, Singapore really, really knows how to treat their passengers well, including the little ones that come on board with them.
Anyway, let's come back to number two. They can start with your next redemption, and then
Sure.
we get over our disappointment of the World Cup final.
Oh, or we can keep to the theme. In no this is in no particular order, by the way. I just am riffing. I just wrote down the airline names that I wanted to talk about, but this is in no particular order. And because we're talking disappointments, let's just stick to that theme. I say this tongue in cheek because I want to talk about Air India's first class cabin that I recently experienced back in March. On my way back from India, I was able to find Delhi, Washington, D.C. to Ottawa, that entire flight, and it cost me 116,000 aeroplan points one way. And $100, $105 Canadian, which is again about 75, $80 US. Fantastic experience. Again, had very little expectation from the flight because I knew both that it'll be an older configuration, nothing fancy. The unfortunate, well, the unfortunate event that has happened recently with Air Canada is putting that aside. In March, when I was coming through, I had very low expectations. I mean, I've observed and flown, and my parents have been flying Air India for the longest time. It's very pedestrian as a product. Even first class, when I read the reviews, I was like, oh boy, why did I book this? But I thought, you know what? It's worthwhile an experience. I'd never done first class on Air India. I'd only ever done up until business class. So I figured, hey, let's do this and see how it goes. As I walked into the cabin, I kind of realized what I had signed up for because the carpets were stained, the seats were the seat covers were barely holding on to the seat, like they were frayed from the side and all of that. But as soon as, and this may sound very weird and funny at the same time. As soon as the lights were dimmed out and I could not see the stains and the fraying seats, it really went through well because the seats were super comfortable. These were some of the biggest first class seats I've ever seen. There's only actually four seats. It's 1-to-1 configuration. Triple seven going from Delhi to Washington, D.C. I think it's AI 103, if I remember correctly. This is how nerdy I get. 101 and 102 is between Delhi and New York, and 103 is AI 103 flies between 3104 flies between DC and Delhi. Anyways, as soon as the lights were dimmed out and you couldn't see the stains and the things that were not very pleasant, the rest of the flight was fantastic, including the soft service, including everything we've just spoken about, which is older seat configurations. One thing great about some of these older seat configurations is we are talking about the old school, heavily cushioned, heavy seats, which are fantastic for the seat comfort, the duvet, the amenities. The pajama sets I got were fantastic. Amenity kit itself was amazing. So everything else other than the aesthetically unpleasing sights when I first walked in was just mind blowing on that Air India flight. And I in fact was so impressed. I had a conversation with the cabin crew and I said, hey, look, I know you can't do anything about the aesthetics of the cabin, but everything beyond that, you guys are doing a terrific job. And they were so happy to hear that because they know the kind of media that they get. They know the kind of trashing that they receive by frequent flyers, by premium cabin flyers across the board. And they acknowledge that things are improving in the right way. And as soon as these newer aircrafts come into the market, the product jump will be significant, but it takes time. If you think about an airline that has sort of left competition for about 30 years and it's just joining back in the real world, if you know what I mean, it will take them at least 10 to 15 years just to tidy up their game. So yeah, for all of those reasons, the food was impeccable, fantastic. For those that don't know, Air India partners with Taj Sats, the catering company, and which is the Taj Group. Just fantastic. If you've ever eaten at any of the Taj establishments, they really try and bring that aesthetic on board with their food, the flavor profiles, and everything was spot on. So I really had an exceptional flight. I slept on that, and this was a long flight, I think 14, 15-hour flight. I slept 7 to 8 hours straight. Like and this wasn't because it was a long journey or anything. It was my first leg coming back after a very restful week with my parents in Mumbai. So I wasn't tired at all, but I slept really well on that. The temperature of the cabin, and that's the other piece I really hate about European airlines. They love keeping their cabin temperatures super hot for whatever reason. And I like my cabin temperatures on the cooler side. And I thought Air India did a fantastic job keeping the cabin temperatures on the cooler side because you dress up, you can put duvets on yourself as much as you want. You can only dress down so much in a cabin if it's super hot. So yeah, all of those little soft service elements came together. And I think other than Korean Airlines, I cannot think of a single first class cabin out there that had 4 full Boeing windows assigned. So that I'm just trying to give you the idea of how long these seats are and how wide the seats are. 4 full windows. We are talking Boeing 777 windows, 4 full windows. And I think Korean Air is the only other uh, first class cabin that has 4 full windows. And maybe Air France La Première, maybe. Maybe they don't even have 4 full windows. Just, yeah, Air India first class really surprised me.
I mean, I had almost the same experience as you did. This was in 2023, and we flew on the SFO New Delhi route. And this was in business. This was not first, but again, we booked it using aeroplane points. And that time we were traveling with the Lapins, and again, old plane. So again, we had no expectations. We had access to the lounge at the United Lounge in San Francisco. And then again, we were talking to the staff, and the captain came out, and as you said, they acknowledged what was really going on. In our case, we were not that finicky back then because we were more really concerned about just eating enough and then putting our kid to sleep for the flight. But again, as you said, the food was really good. It was fantastic. And the soft product was excellent. The seats, I wouldn't rate them very high. I would say like maybe 6 or 7 out of 10. But I would still say that for the amount of miles that we paid back then, I think it was quite less. I think something like 90,000 was a very good experience because, with an app in front, you end up paying about 180,000 for 2 people. It was pretty decent.
Yeah, and I think what you are really alluding to there is for a person that might be looking to experience business class for the first time and first class for the first time, yes, you want the aesthetically pleasing cabins. And when you read about those, you're like, oh, this is aspirational. I really want to try and do that. But for people that are into points and miles and are able to unlock these premium cabins rather easily, it then starts to go way beyond the aesthetics of things. It starts to go, you're talking about comfort levels. What do you care about? Are you traveling with family? All the elements that you've just spoken about that you were more concerned with having a decent meal and putting your kid to bed. Because if I was traveling with family, that would be priority, right? Feed your kid well, let them rest, and then you rest as and when your kid allows you to. So yeah, different strokes for everybody, and I'm glad we're talking about all of those elements. As you sort of start to experience more and more of these premium cabins, you realize that the soft product is way more important than the hard product itself, because after a certain again, there's anomalies all over the place, but a set standard of a business class seat is that it'll be comfortable, way more comfortable than economy or premium economy to begin with, and that you'll be able to lay down flat. That's the set standard. Once you've met that standard, then you really start looking at how good is the food, how good is the duvet cover, how good is the service on board, are they genuinely courteous, are they able to improvise, or are they able to do things slightly differently outside of the template, if you will, to make you feel accommodated, and all of those really come to mind when you start thinking about your best redemption.
Um, I've done some of these, and I can obviously see myself evolve through the times when I first flew business class. What my expectations were, probably a bit starry eyed, and now it's almost reached the point, as you said, people in our space, we've tried so many different airlines and alliances that we almost tend to be sometimes a bit more critical than the average person because you try to look at all those smaller elements and, obviously since you're reviewing these products, you tend to look at it in a lot more granular detail.
Just adding, no, I'm saying, agreeing with you that we should be critical, because a frequent flyer starts to become a little more critical is because they are a frequent flyer, is because they're exposed to that service level, exposed to that cabin over and over again, that you start noticing things beyond that first scratch, if you will. It's the same as, I think you'll appreciate this as a traveler. You go and explore a country for the first time. You do all of the touristy things, all of the things you've seen on Instagram, blah, blah. You enjoy it, you come back. It's the second, the third, the fourth time that you keep going back to the same places that you really start experiencing it in a very different way. And it's the same with premium cabins as well.
I was recently traveling, this was last year, with some family and friends, and I won't name the hotel, but this was supposedly a 5-star hotel, a brand new 5-star hotel. And we stayed there for a couple of nights, and me and my wife came out extremely disappointed with the entire experience. And then we had a few people in our party who were newbie travelers. and they were thrilled, and they were almost looking at us as if, why are you guys disappointed?
Yeah, and those are the follies of traveling with a frequent flyer, because we are very difficult to please and we are very easily critical of things because we've seen them so many times. And yeah, it happens all the time when I travel with friends who are not frequent flyers. They're pretty much happy with most things that come at them. And I'm the one looking at it from a critical eye to an extent where you have to, as a frequent flyer, really dial back because it's difficult for a non-frequent flyer to dial it up and come on with you and see it through your eyes. But it's very easy, or should be easier, for a frequent flyer to dial it back and try and experience it from a first timer's perspective.
I think in this case also what happens is I think empathy plays a big role. So my father worked for many years in the hotel industry, and I grew up uh, actually being around a lot of hotels. So I obviously empathize a lot when things go wrong. I can almost tell that in certain cases was an operational issue, something just went wrong when the hotel was almost 100% full. And sometimes you can just clearly see its negligence, and then you tend to put your foot forward and say, this shouldn't be your standard. And then sometimes you will see that they're actually very, very receptive to your feedback when you put it in a way that, resonates with them, as opposed to saying, oh my God, this is so bad. Because that's what they're used to hearing most of the times. I know we can just keep talking about all of our stays, and I know this conversation might go on for 3 hours. So we just try to keep and run a tight ship. And what do you have next?
But yeah, the next one, I think, purely in terms of how different it was and how like good memories I have, I'd pick Cathay Pacific's first class. Cathay Pacific used to fly a first class service between New York and Vancouver, Canada. It used to be a 5-hour first class flight, which was a fifth freedom route, of course, and was exceptional value because if I remember it correctly, it used to be 50,000 avios and also about the same on American if you're booking it using American miles. But I had used Alaska at the time. I used 75,000 Alaska miles to book myself from JFK to Vancouver, all the way through to Hong Kong. And again, great value. And what made that Fifth Freedom route particularly special was they would not move their service standards for it to be a North American domestic product. They treated it like a full first class international route. So you would get the bells and whistles while you were in first class Cathay Pacific. And first class Cathay Pacific is really, really good. Forget all the newer sort of configurations that we are seeing now. Even back in the day, I think I'm talking about maybe 2015 or thereabouts. Fantastic service, fantastic product, and just such a novelty item to have a full service international standard first class flying between, heck, even within US or US to Canada. It was just crossing the continent, right? Which was, yeah, it's some of my best memories on that flight because I've done it a couple of times because it was cheap enough. Sometimes if you wanted to go to Vancouver from Ottawa, you would easily do a positioning flight to JFK, which is like an hour and a half flight from Ottawa, and then go to Vancouver that way, as opposed to flying Ottawa to Vancouver directly, say on Air Canada. Right. So far better experience as a first class flyer. But if you were able to, like in that one instance that I did, find something all the way through to Hong Kong, Alaska was fantastic, even back in the day where you could just combine, you could combine one partner with one Alaska. In this case, you didn't even have to fly Alaska. You could just go direct on Cathay all the way from JFK to Hong Kong with a stop in Vancouver. So yeah, really fond memories of that. And like I said, the reason that was special is, again, same idea, full first class service on that 5-hour domestic route, I'm going to call it. And service was really, really good. The food that they were catering out of JFK would basically be the exact same food they would cater out of Vancouver to Hong Kong. So you were enjoying your noodle bowl. You were enjoying all of the things that you love about Cathay. The champagne was great. Just across the board service models were great. And like I said, the reason it was very special, or still holds a special memory in my brain cells, is because it was essentially a domestic leg within North America that I was flying in through first class. And it was, I think, just under 5 hours going from JFK to Vancouver. And a lot of people would just take joyrides. JFK to Vancouver and then come back because it was cheap enough, 50,000 American miles, and everybody was trying to do it at the time. Again, old style seats, so very comfortable plush cushions and all of that, an extremely generous soft product with the amenity kit given to you, even if you are flying only 5 hours, the full champagne service, the caviar service, and everything came with even on that 5 hour leg, which was fantastic. I suppose it was far too generous for its times, so we haven't seen it come back. And that route was, I think, cancelled either during COVID or just before COVID. You'll have to check. Unfortunately, that leg doesn't go anymore. But of course, where Hong Kong continues to be a very popular route on Cathay Pacific for folks. Yeah, that comes to mind right off the back.
Once flown San Francisco, Hong Kong, Singapore using Alaska miles. I think it was something like 65,000 back then. This must be 2017 or 18. And again, I mean, that experience was really amazing. They have an amazing lounge at SFO, both the hard and soft product. I still remember I had some food and drink in the lounge before taking off, and then maybe had a champagne while boarding. And I slept like a baby for the next 12 to 13 hours until we reached Hong Kong. And for those who don't know, I mean, if you look at even Cathay Pacific Asia Miles, that they have a pretty good award charters. The last time I checked, for a 6 hour flight from Mumbai to Hong Kong, it's something like 36,000 Asia Miles in business and 43,000 or something like that in first, and just 18,000 or 19,000 in economy. And what's great is that it also unlocks access to other one-world partners. I was checking, and it's only 17,000 miles, Mumbai to Kuala Lumpur on Malaysian. So there's some really good value, not just in premium cabins, but also in coach when you're flying around Southeast Asia, if you know how to use Asia Miles.
Yeah, for sure. Even for us here in Canada, Asia Miles definitely is, for a lot of people, their preferred second choice of miles and such because of how good that chart is. More and more in the recent past, a lot of programs, including Cathay, have become very insular in the sense that they really don't share a lot of partner award space outside of their own programs. So if you really wanted to book Cathay first class and such, your best bet is to do it out of using Cathay Asia Miles themselves, as opposed to trying to find, the few and far between availability that you would probably find on American is probably the best one. Alaska has really become poor in terms of giving you Cathay availability these days, especially in premium cabins. But yeah, Cathay Miles is fantastic, particularly for intra-Asia. And when I say Asia, I mean truly all of Asia, including India and the subcontinent. There's flights out of Mumbai going to Hong Kong. There's flights out of Delhi, direct flights out of Delhi that go on the 777 as well. Yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about Cathay Asia Miles. And they also, I think, are starting to do what Singapore does with their Singapore Escapes, which is every month some routes will go on discounts, and Cathay has started doing that as well. So if you're able to find some of these discounted rates for flying within Asia, or even I find Asia going into Australia or the Australasia continent, then you get really good value out of that program. So yeah, really good program.
I think that Singapore Escapes continues to be one of my favorites because American Express transfers almost instantly. And I don't remember in the last 3 years, one of the prime reasons why I've flown so much to Southeast Asia is because you get essentially 2 business class flights sometimes for 30,100 miles with a discount. And I recently pulled off actually something which was, as you mentioned, this comes back to the topic. Aeroplan wasn't releasing enough seats in Singapore, and I was trying to do something very ambitious, trying to book 7 business class seats for my entire family to travel to Vietnam. So we were trying from Mumbai to Singapore to Ho Chi Minh, and then I found the same availability with KrisFlyer miles. So it cost me a bit more. It cost me 43,000 miles. I was able to book it instantly as opposed to, I think Aeroplan was only releasing something like 2 or 3 seats, so which wasn't good enough for me.
Yeah, the Aeroplan Singapore thing is same thing. Singapore is, every airline, like I said, is trying to restrict partner award availability on other programs. They want you to engage with their program as much as possible directly. So Singapore Escapes, if you're slightly flexible in terms of your dates and time, or in fact, even where you would want to go in a particular region, then those escape pricing is just insanely valuable. And the number of times, because you mentioned Vietnam, Singapore, the number of times I've done that a 2 hour route with Singapore is just exceptional because it gets great value out of the escapes promotions often. Singapore does Singapore Escapes. Air France has their own, I forget now what they call it, like the monthly promo awards. Yeah, that's what it's called. Lufthansa does their own through the Miles and Smiles not Miles and More program. Miles and More. I think Miles and Smiles is Turkish, right? Or is Turkish just Smiles?
Miles and Smiles.
Yeah, yeah. So they all do these monthly escape routes or whatever they're called. And if you're willing to travel from a non-hub destination to a non-hub destination, or if you can manage one of those are some of the best points deals out there. So be a little flexible. And even if you're thinking of, say, in your example, going to Vietnam, even if you don't see a Vietnam, if you find yourself going to somewhere in Bangkok, just get to Bangkok with escape pricing. And then Bangkok to Vietnam is a very small route. You can pay as much as or as little as $200 for business class seats between those two cities. So yeah, lots of ways to maximize your sort of value and reach of your miles and points. And that region, particularly all of Asia, Southeast Asia, including South Asia now, is really, really strong through these promotional pricing.
I recently written about the same Singapore escapes, and as you mentioned correctly, there was no availability in business from Singapore to Sydney. But if you want to fly from Singapore to Perth or Singapore to Adelaide, you are finding the seats available in business. So as you said, you have to be a bit more flexible.
Yeah. Be flexible and don't shy away from, I think in the next few years, this entire idea of having a diverse portfolio of miles, it's really going to go on its head in the sense that not only do you want a primary and secondary program, if you are able to keep some of these miles or points strategically in 3 or 4 programs, depending on your travel patterns and your expectations, then having some points sitting in a North American program, some points in an Asian program, some points in an Australian program. If you have enough access to these points around like global programs, then your travel becomes that much easier and you don't have to be as flexible because in your case, as soon as you mentioned Perth, great example, like oftentimes folks gravitate towards Brisbane, Sydney, maybe Melbourne, but Brisbane and Sydney get so much international traffic that people forget that Perth has about the same availability. But most people don't want to fly to Perth. But if you do fly to Perth, then you get a lot of cheaper tickets on cash or even miles using the Qantas program and fly Qantas within Australia, make Perth into a stopover and then get to wherever you want to. I've done that more recently as well through my travels in Australia. So yeah, great value if you're able to tap into a couple of these programs across different alliances.
All right, so we already have 3 and we've discussed a lot of different alliances and partner airlines and charts. So it's a lot of information. What's next?
The other 2 are a little more quintessential. So I'll say Qatar Airways, Qatar First Class on the A380. The reason I bring that up is because Qatar has basically announced, but not yet, and said that they're not going to invest as much in their first class cabins. They'll invest a little bit, but they're putting pretty much all of their money and intentions on that Q suites and beyond. Q suites are the future of Q suites is really, really bright. But the A380, which is the older first class product, same idea as the Air India, except in this case, it's not only the only sort of thing that doesn't sit well for a lot of people flying Qatar first class would say is the privacy is not the best because the walls are not very high, but it's high enough. But when you lean back and just in your seating position, you can still see the screens of people beside you. And it's again, one-to-one configuration, super nice seats on the A380s, very plush. The service is really what takes it above and beyond. And the A380, of course, has the lovely Qatar bar as well. Fantastic bar service for first class and business class flyers. But overall, that really took me by surprise because when I had initially booked it, I think I booked it using Qatar Privilege, Qatar Avios, which is Avios is a consolidated currency across 5 or 6 airlines, Qatar being one. So I transferred my British Airways Avios. I didn't even have to transfer. It was linked. As long as you have your Avios programs linked, you can easily move your Avios miles from one to the next. So I moved it from my BA Avios and was able to redeem. I think my route was Montreal, Doha on Q Suite, so it's a mixed cabin, and then Doha to Bangkok was first class on the A380. And of all the A380s I've flown, Etihad, Emirates, Qatar, I think I have to say purely in terms of comfort level and not being super in your face opulence and yet having a very refined, elevated product, Qatar is right up there. I think Etihad beats it just by a little bit. And that's my other fifth one would be Etihad first class.
Going back to the Qatar example, do you remember how much you paid for that in miles?
Yes, had to be around. So because so when you do it out of Qatar privilege, they offer flexi rewards. So if you don't find saver rewards, which I didn't, I paid flexi rewards, and I think I paid 160 or 165,000 avios for the entire route. Had I found saver reward, I think I would have been. I think it would have been 130, if not 120. So I paid a few thousand extra, but I was happy with doing the Q suites from Montreal to Doha, and then first class. It was they call it flexi rewards because that's where you pay. It's their version of dynamic pricing, basically. So I paid 165,000, and I think taxes and fees were about $300 or so Canadian, so about 250. 40 US, if that's your metric. Yeah, but excellent, excellent soft service product. I love the lamp that they had, warm lighting. The service was, like I said, excellent. They made the bed for you and they invited you into the lounge. So it was very timed. It never felt like they were doing it as a set standard of things. Everybody had their very personalized way of eating food whenever they wanted to. And the service delivery model was fantastic. Not once did you feel that you were doing something that was out of the ordinary or they were doing something very different for you. And that's how they made it seem. So it was really, really good. And the bar itself was much bigger than Emirates bar that gets so much media. The bar space on Qatar's A380 is far better in terms of seating, in terms of how much space you have compared to the bar on the A380 Emirates. So just putting it out there, that Emirates bar gets so much attention and the Qatar bar is a lot better in terms of overall experience for business and first class flyers.
So you give the example of flexi rewards. I think it reminded me of what even Singapore does, where they have the saver and the advantage pricing. It's pretty similar in that case. Now I might be committing blasphemy here, but I have never traveled. I've never flown yet. I've flown the other two Middle Eastern carriers, but I don't know. It's not that I don't want to fly. It's somehow it has never worked for my schedule and the routing or whatever. Because when I flew to Europe, previously when I used to fly between India and the US a lot, I used to fly Emirates or Singapore if I would fly via Asia. So it's just that someday it will happen. And now that you have told me about your experience, I'm even more convinced to try it out.
Yeah, and there might be a good reason for why Qatar doesn't feature on everybody's plans is because they're part of a alliance, like a One World alliance. So unless you have points and unless you have active participation in that program, you're not really looking for that. But more importantly, Etihad, on the other hand, is not part of any alliance. So they have partnerships with pretty much most major airlines in the world. So be it Aeroplan, be it American, be it. So you are able to find Etihad availability a lot more across partners than you would find Qatar availability at saver awards or at saver levels, say with American or Qatar's own program, right? So I think that's why for Qatar, you have to work a little bit extra or go out of your way to fit that into your plan if you're not dabbling in those programs and miles. Whereas with Etihad, a lot more flexible in terms of where you can redeem them out of because they have so many of these independent partnerships because they're not part of an alliance. Without further ado, that would be my last one I would pick simply because that was one of my first class flights I did after COVID hit. So I was really yearning to get back into that experience of things. And the crew made it the crew made all the difference. The flight director who was on board was really, really fantastic. So it was Priya and I, my wife and I, and they made it. And I think we might have been the only two people in the cabin. So we got extra attention, just everything was so good. It again comes back to the soft product. I'm talking about the food, the service delivery, the white glove service that you get. Again, I'm not the kind of person that looks forward to that, but there is something about it when somebody comes impeccably dressed in their white glove and is trying to serve you food. So you try and get that sort of very refined, almost Michelin star experience, 30,000 feet in the air, which makes it so special. And then the ability for them to sort of completely cater the experience to how you want it, because I was very different in the sense that I was pretty much up, and this was, I think, the route that I'd taken was a combination of Air Canada. Etihad, I'd booked it using my Aeroplan miles. Around 130,000 Aeroplan miles because I was flying from Newark. This was a combination of United and Etihad that I'd flown. So I was doing Newark to London. London to Abu Dhabi was the first class, and then Abu Dhabi, Mumbai was back again in their business class studio, Etihad business class. But their ability to sort of really cater to your preferences in however you wanted it to be, however you wanted your journey to be, like when did you want to eat, when did you want to sleep, when did you want to do whatever you wanted to do, was just seamless. Because just between the two of us, even I was up for the entire trip, just enjoying my experiences and whatnot. Whereas Priya, I think, slept through the entire flight, maybe other than the last hour. And for a lot of people that would not understand why would you sleep through the entire flight. Like I said, everybody sort of values things very differently. Because we had done that long flight from Newark to London already, and then a 4-hour layover in London, this was a long way to get to Mumbai. Let's be honest. So yeah, one person was sleeping throughout the flight and yet got her food and her attention for the hour and a bit that she was awake, and the other person that was awake throughout was being sort of doled out the service that they could. So yeah, really fond memories, and I think it was particularly to do with that was my first class since COVID shutdowns. I was really yearning for that kind of experience.
I had a very interesting experience since you mentioned that. So between me and my wife, I'm usually the one who sleeps on flights. And we were flying back. This was when we could book Japan Airlines using Alaska miles. And it was something like, I don't remember the exact number. I think it was something between 65 and 70,000 people. We booked it in business class from Hanoi, Vietnam to Tokyo, and then from Tokyo to San Diego. And I remember, I had not done any of the meal selection. We had a very hectic trip. We had 3 days in Hanoi and we'd gone to Halal Bay. We did a lot of exploring. Somehow forgotten to put in all those pre-ordered meal requests and things like that. And I boarded the plane and they realized that they don't have enough vegetarian food. And I'm vegetarian. I didn't make a fuss about it. I said, like, it's okay, whatever you can get me a sandwich, you can get me something to drink, and I'll be fine. I was anyway tired, and it was going to be a 12-hour flight. I was going to sleep, so I fell asleep as expected. After a few hours, I'm kind of feeling a pat on my shoulder, and at first thought it was my wife waking me up. It was the flight attendant who was waking me up and telling me that we only have about an hour and a half. Do you want me to get something for you? And they got me some soup. And she was standing there looking at me as if like, oh, this guy is probably not going to be full after having the soup. So she got me a nice Haagen-Dazs ice cream to eat. So, I mean, I was so pleased to just see that level of attention that there were probably about 15 to 20 people in the cabin, and they were still paying attention to the fact that there's this one guy who hasn't been fed. So we might as well give him something to eat. And I was also offered the second serving, which was very nice, which I didn't obviously take, but it was really, really nice to see that. It was almost like a home beef, where they're really taking care of whether you're being well fed and well rested.
Yeah, and it goes a long way, right? And that's a big thing that airlines around the globe need to learn, that you don't have to do a lot for a passenger, but just that extra step, extra caring word of, have you eaten anything? Would you like to? You haven't, like whatever the case might be, even just asking the genuine curiosity and saying that, hey, you've been sleeping all this while. Do you want to eat anything? Well, because we'll be landing. Just that shows you that they are paying attention. Without naming names, there are airlines in my part of the world who couldn't give a damn about if you ate or didn't eat, or if you didn't eat, good for them because they had to serve one less person. But then there's the entire hospitality spectrum of Asia and South Asia, or the Middle East, which is completely on a different stratosphere, I would say, when it comes to caring, or at least genuinely trying to cater to a customer who's paying miles or cash or whatever and is patronizing your brand. Yeah, goes a long way.
One of the metrics that I often talk about is just like for me, you've stayed a lot at different hotels and flown all these vegan products. And you have that sixth sense developed in you where you can see whether an employee is doing it because it is a job or if they really want to do it. And you can tell that within the first few hours of your stay or flight beginning. So I'll give you an example. We recently stayed at the Ritz-Carlton in Krabi, which is one of the six, I think, Ritz-Carlton Reserve properties. And the level of minutia that they paid attention to was just insane. I mean, they just wanted to get all kinds of information. What kind of travel would you like to do when you're here? What would you like to eat? When do you want to take the ferry to the island? We have a complimentary ferry. And what was really good to see that it was actually taken care of when we were there. So it's not like there's someone who put it in a notebook somewhere and just shoved it away. It was actually put on the ground and followed when we were there. And our butler really knew all that information when she was interacting with us. And this was really good to see.
Yeah, like personalization, especially at five-star resorts or five-star properties, if you can't offer personalization in this day and age, why are you even existing? You should just stop. You should just become a usual three-star hotel catering to business travelers if you cannot offer personalization. I think that's the distinction I look at, be it any brand, Marriott brands or any other brands or Ritz-Carlton Reserve that you said, is having a five-star or having a property which is really refined and elevated, but is mostly catering to business travelers, will have a very different vibe than somebody that's catering to the true tourist who spend money and taking the time to come to their property to spend whatever, a week, 2 weeks of their entire year with them. So yeah, a lot of those reserve properties are like that. Higher end properties are starting to understand that that's where the real distinction is. Somebody like a Four Seasons, for example, they're not looking at your points and how they just simply look at how well they know you as a customer. The difference between going to a Four Seasons the first time and Four Seasons the second time is night and day, because the first time they'll make the best attempt to get you what you want. The second time you go to that same property, you don't even have to open your mouth, and they know exactly your preferences, the things they'll address you by your last name. I remember going to not even far off here in Montreal, Four Seasons, went down the second time. Every time I went to breakfast, the second time around I went, the first time I think the uh, waiter caught me by surprise because she said, "Oh, Mr. Singh, omelet with cheese again?" And I'm like, I haven't said a word, but they knew this from my previous day. And of course, their systems are talking to each other. Their preferences are loaded up, and they know who's a repeat customer and who isn't. So yeah, if you can't personalize, you may as well just be a usual three-star property for a business traveler.
I have a crazy personalization story which I never expected in my life. I would never have it on my bingo card. I checked into Hilton Cartagena in Colombia, and I check in and I'm talking to the front desk, as usual, what my room is like. They've been giving us all the introduction to the amenities and things like that. And all of a sudden, the front desk manager tells me that, oh, he looks at my passport, he looks at my details and says, oh, I think Vinod might want to meet you. And I'm wondering, I don't have any friend by the name of Vinod. Who is this guy? And it turns out the general manager of the hotel was a guy from India. And he was just built to see someone from India visiting at that point of time. He had never seen me for many months. And we checked in, and you won't believe, within a few moments, we had someone knock at our door. And we probably thought that, it would be like a cake or something because it was my wife's birthday. And they obviously sent the cake, but they also sent some samosas. So if somebody would have told me that you will one day go to Colombia and eat samosas in your hotel room, I would have probably laughed it off.
Sure. That's it, right? That's the key thing there, because that one gesture has had you completely hooked as a core memory in your mind, in your family's mind. And then every chance you get, you are going to talk about them. So next time I go to Cartagena, Colombia, now I know, hey, Ashish mentioned that, so I should check out that property. Not because I want that same kind of treatment or surprises, but the fact that you said something good about a property. In a world of, I don't know how many thousands of hotel properties there are in this world, these are the things that stand out. When your friends share that with you, it's not because a reviewer said that it was, 7 out of 10. It's not that. But if they mention something like you did, that's what sticks in my mind. And I'd be like, you know what, I'm going to go there and see if they're well worth that core memory that Ashish shared with me. So 100%, that's what it's about, the personalization in the hotels.
All right. I think we had a lot of fun chatting, and I think we can keep going on and on. There's so many hotels and airlines to talk about. But before we wrap up, we have a fun segment, which I call Rapid Fire. Fasten your seatbelts. My very first question: when you have the odd instance of you flying in coach, do you prefer aisle or window?
Window if it's under 3 hours. window. I don't get up a lot. I don't use the washroom, at least up until now. I'm in my early 40s. I'm sure when I hit 50 and more, if I have to use the washroom more often, then I would start doing aisle. Aisle is good for a little more elbow room and space, but I don't mind. I mean, I like the window because I also like to take videos and pictures out of the window seat itself. So yeah, window.
What is your favorite first class flight?
Favorite first class flight ever? That's a tough one. I'll go with Etihad. Yeah, Etihad, the one that I just described, was probably, yeah, one of my most cherished moments. Again, more to do with not having traveled for a couple of years before that, but yeah.
And how about this?
People may find this surprising. I really, really, really like signature class with Air Canada. They are very consistent. They don't do things in a fancy way, but they're a very Canadian way of doing things is do it well and keep that consistently well. And I think Air Canada does that really well on their long haul flights in signature class, which is their business class. Yeah, so I would say Air Canada business class.
What's your most memorable hotel stay booked with points and why?
That's a tough one. I think I would say going back to Oman. I forget the name now. It was up in the mountains. And more so because I was able to book something. I was able to book a full bi-level suite using my points, and my mom and dad were with me. So it was a nice family experience and a shared experience. Again, just outside of COVID, so maybe early 2022 or thereabouts. So that one was really, really special. I booked a regular suite. Once we got into the thing, they offered a premium upgrade, and they said, since you're here with your mom and dad, you like the bi-level suite, you all get your own privacy, you know. So yeah, I think I paid $300 on top for that premium upgrade. Worth every penny. The property was just mind blowing. Now I feel like a dummy because I can't remember the name, but it was a Park Hyatt, well, not Muscat, Oman, up in the mountains. You'll have to look it
So
up.
speaking of which, I was speaking about my Vietnam trip, and we just booked a 4-bedroom villa for a family trip. We will be 7 people, and this is at the Renaissance Hoi An in Vietnam,
Mhm.
and it cost me something like just 100K points, married bonvoy points. So
Nice.
this was a fantastic redemption in terms of we have our own private swimming pool along with the house, and it's just insane. Something like 3,500 square feet of area. So it's just amazing value. Where you pay about 300K bonvoy points for 3 nights to accommodate 7 people.
That's amazing. Anytime you can book anything with points for more than 2 or 3 people, that's just fantastic value to begin with. Many programs and not many instances where you can use your points for the entire family or for a group of families to be together in connected rooms or whatever the case might be.
Even in case of Hilton, it clearly says that even the 3 night certificate's only for double occupancy. So they don't let you go beyond.
Exactly.
Right,
And that's what, sorry, I was saying, and that's why that part of the world is so special because they allow you to do a lot of these redemptions at much cheaper rates. And the hospitality, the service is just impeccable. So yeah, just Vietnam in general is amazing, but that region as well is such good service standards around.
Now, I know that you have traveled to many countries, but is there any dream travel destination that is on your bucket list, and where are you going next?
Bucket list, I have to be very honest without sounding like a old man guru here. I don't do bucket lists because bucket lists change for me every time. So it was different when I was in my 20s. It was different when I was in my 30s. In my 40s and beyond, I really just want to do as many trips as I can with my family, with my loved ones. For whatever time I have left. So it really doesn't matter in terms of which destination I go to with my parents or with my wife and whatnot. As long as we can have fun together as a family, that to me becomes a bucket list item. In August, we are doing a 2.5 week sort of road trip. Priya, me, and our dog Anya. We are doing pretty much 4 states or provinces, as we call them here in Canada, the eastern coast. So we've been going out what we call our East Coast trip since 2012. Every single year we've done that, including COVID years. You just go out, and every time you go, it's something different because it's the ocean. It's the typical sort of mountain on one side, ocean on the other, and you're just driving around along that coastline. So super beautiful. And like I said, the reason I'm giving you a long-winded answer is because I don't have bucket lists. I don't believe in bucket lists anymore. I used to. If you asked me in my 20s, I'd give you very specific bucket list items. Now I feel like as long as I have my family and loved ones together, and it also comes from since Points, Miles, and Bling became like a full-time endeavor, it became a brand. And I travel quite a lot for work as well, my own work. So I'm traveling alone. Traveling alone is great for up until a certain point, and then it gets boring. At the end of the day, why are you doing this? You're doing this so that you can travel better with your loved ones. So I put a lot more emphasis these days on that aspect of travel. So yeah, no bucket lists, but I just like to travel wherever Points and Miles and can take me with my family.
For many in the miles and points space, I think, and this might resonate with you, is that often the miles and points dealings dictate where we go next, as opposed to us saying that, this is on my bucket list. And every time we see a promotion that comes out, we almost tend to change our plans based on, hey, I don't remember the number of times I've said to my wife, can you believe business class is just 40,000 miles or first class is just 50,000 miles? And then we almost change our plans. And for a lot of people like us who see those promos or transfer bonuses, and then we just can't control ourselves and we say, okay, I'm not going to country A, I'm going to country Y. It's the plans just change diametrically.
Yeah, and growing up or in the movies, you would see this idea of let's throw a dart on the map wherever it lands, we'll go. That sounded like a novel idea, but essentially you are talking about doing the same thing except wherever the promo takes you, right?
Yeah.
So you are able to explore places that you may not have planned before, and that is such a novel way of doing it, as well as a very privileged way of doing it, because Points and Miles allow you to do that, and your lifestyle allows you to be a little more flexible in terms of when you can do what you can do.
All right, the very last question, and your favorite hotel and airline program.
Look, Hyatt would be my absolute favorite because they love to spoil you rotten within the program, but it is a smaller footprint. So I'd now gravitate towards, they used to be partners with Hyatt, oh my God, what's the partnership? What am I thinking of now? They're with Hilton. SLH. Yeah. Small luxury hotels is a great way to do it because then you again hit up very niche luxury properties around the world while remaining in that ecosystem of Hyatt and now Hilton, because now they're partnering with Hilton. So yeah, but Hyatt, because I was a top tier member for years, for almost a good 10 years up until last year. I'm only a mid tier member now, but Hyatt treated me really, really well. So that for airline, I don't think I've gotten better value out of and the ease of using Aeroplan in my life. So Aeroplan is just by quite a distance my favorite program for all my redemptions.
Yeah, you mentioned SLH. I was doing some research for a blog post a few weeks back, and you wouldn't believe now with Hilton Points, you can book a property in the Maldives. I don't remember the exact name. I think it's Baros, Baros. And when you book with Hilton Honors Points, they also include your boat transfers, which is
Ah,
fantastic because
cool.
otherwise, you would be paying what, 300, $400 for one person. So that kind of value, as you said, with the small luxury hotels, that if you can do something like that in the Maldives, where let's say you have gold status at Hilton with the platinum card, and you already have complimentary breakfast, and then you have something like this where you also have your boat transfers taken care of. It's just the icing on the cake.
Yeah, no, I mean that's it. That's the premium thing that you can do. Yeah, you couldn't have given a better example of Maldives for a lot of the Points and Miles enthusiasts. So yeah, for sure.
All right. I think we have had a lot of information in one episode, and I think I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Would love to have you back again. As I said, there are just endless topics. One of the topics that actually came into my mind was the fact that we can call it maybe the graveyard of miles and points, where awesome miles and points that are now dead. There are so many of them. Yeah, I mean, using Alaska to fly Emirates, that comes to mind amongst many. But anyway, I had a great time. It's almost been more than an hour. That tells that, I had a lot of fun listening in on what you've been doing. For our audience, let them know where they can find you and they get in touch with you if they have any questions.
Easiest way would be on Instagram. So Points, Miles, and Bling on Instagram would be the easiest way. So yeah, that's where you can fire off your questions, and I'm happy to engage with you.
All right, so that wraps up the episode. We had a lot of fun, and I hope you also enjoyed a lot of information that we gave you during this particular episode. We'll be back very soon in the next episode. Until then, you have a great one, and talk to you soon.
So that wraps up yet another episode of the Travel Dialogue podcast. Thank you once again for watching. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube and become a part of the Travel Tribe as we grow the podcast. You can also find the podcast on other platforms like Apple Podcasts and more. You will find us on social media at the Travel Dialogue Podcast on X, Instagram, and Facebook as well. Partner with us in the growth of the podcast by supporting us through any of the links in the description below. Until then, have a great one, and we will see you in the next episode.